On this episode of the Ask Mike Reinold Show, we talk about the strength of ACL grafts over time.
The Ask Mike Reinold Show. Helping people feel better, move better, and perform better.
Before we get to the podcast, I wanted to make sure you knew about my free online course on the introduction to performance therapy and training. If you want to learn how to get started optimizing and enhancing performance, this is the course for you. Head to mikereinold.com/performance to sign up today. Welcome back, everybody, to the latest episode of the Ask Mike Reinold Show. I am here at Champion PT and Performance. We have our crew, Kevin Coughlin, Dewesh Podell, Lenny Macrina, Dan Pope, Mike Scaduto, Dave Tilley, here answering your questions. If you have a question that you want us to answer on a future episode, head to mikereinold.com, click on that podcast link, and you can fill out the form and we will get to as many as we can. Len, who do we have for students today?
We have three miraculous students, just miracles to have them. We have Brian Hunter from the University of Hartford in Connecticut. We have Cody Adams from Franklin Pierce University, not in New Hampshire, but in Arizona. And we have Eric Deutsch from New York Institute of Technology in somewhere, Long Island or something, or in the Bronx. I don't even know where it is.
I feel like by now you'd have all these things down, right?
Yeah, you would think. I
feel like Lenny went an octave lower with his students today, and I really like that from you. I think the low
voice. my radio voice.
I think Lenny's starting to see why when we first started the podcast, I think I introduced everybody initially, just kind of going through, and then I started like essentially dishing that out to Lenny, so I didn't have to remember all that information. Right? I feel like this is about to get delegated down to somebody else soon. So it's Kevin's turn to introduce the students. But anyway, what do we have today? Who's up today? Brian on his first introductory episode, although it was Cody's too, but last week. But anyway, Brian, what do we have for a question today?
All right, so we got Jeff from Washington, D.C. He asked, when it comes to ACL grafts, can you speak to the strength of patellar tendon grafts versus other autografts over time, including any weakening caused by remodeling of the tissue? And as a bonus question, how the strength of the graft sites for patellar tendon, hamstring tendon, quad tendon are impacted?
You know, Jeff, you snuck two questions in there, and that's a faux pas, right? That's a podcast faux pas, but no, awesome. Good questions, together. I think that's pretty good. This is one of those ones that, if we go through the decades of research, I think we do have some of these answers, but I like it. Len, let's see how much of this you can tackle and see if we even need to add anything to this, but ACL grafts over time, the strength of the grafts of an autograft over time. How strong are they when we first put them in? What happens over the course of the ACL? Give us the rundown.
Yeah, I mean, here comes the rant. No, this should be nice. This will be peaceful. Does it matter? I feel like
that's not peaceful or nice.
I know.
You just threw it back at him.
To me, it matters, but we don't treat it like it matters, because if you look at the research, the graft is strongest when you put it in, right? So it's stronger than your native ACL, whether it's a patella tendon, a hamstring tendon, or a quad tendon. And so when you put it in to the knee, it's stronger than anything you were born with. And so over time, it is thought to weaken. It's ligamentizing. It's a fancy word for just becoming a ligament and realigning its properties to be more ligament-like versus a tendon. But I think it still stays stronger than your native ACL. The problem is when it's going through this process of ligamentizing, it's weakening, so to speak. And so there's some theories of, the first 6 to 8 weeks, you can stretch out the graft. That's why a lot of docs don't want, heavy knee extensions and heavy anterior tibial translation early on. But in general, they're all very, very strong and stronger than anything we know. I actually just put stuff out. I don't want to date this episode, but recently on social media, I put out some stuff that there was a study on sheep ACL, which I know it's sheep, but it showed that they over a year, 2 years, which is what we think it takes for this ligamentation process to occur, that the graft is not as strong. The graft will weaken more to the point than your native ACL. So now it's like cause for concern is are we pushing it too much by, I don't know, doing plyometrics at 10 weeks or running at 12 weeks, roughly. So all that stuff is always in my head of, are we doing the right? Are we doing a disservice? Never mind female, male, this same overview paper showed that female ACLs, their native ACLs have more, they're not as stiff as a male ACL. So maybe that's a connection why females tear their ACLs more than males. So all this stuff is roughly in my head when I'm rehabbing people, and I'm trying to monitor their amount of translation, but still, I don't have a KT, and we just kind of use these as rough guidelines because I don't think we 100% know. A lot of it on animal studies, not necessarily humans.
Yeah, so I was going to say that about the sheep, Len. I don't think the sheep went through the same protocol that us humans go through, right? And I think they went back to being sheep day one, and that was kind of probably part of the process. So who knows? Maybe their grafts never got a chance to heal well because they were sheep day one. I don't think they were non-weight bearing with a nice brace. I don't think they were working on their quad control. Do they have quads? I don't even know. Do they have four quads? So quads? I don't even know. I'm not a sheep guy, right? But that's a tough study with those sorts of things. So I think we got to be a little careful of stuff like
cautious,
that. But like okay, we got a little off topic. But so that is the graft strength.
Yes.
What about fixation though? So you come in, all of a sudden, those two bones aren't touching, or worse, the soft tissue graft that's just tied in there. That fixation strength isn't strong. The graft is strong on day one, but the fixation strength is a weak point. Am I off on that?
No, and you're making my argument why I recommend patella tendon grafts. Maybe I don't know if I have old school thinking or I have misinformation. But I just feel like a patella tendon graft, because the bony bone interface in the tibia and the femur it just heals in 6 weeks. And that's a nice way for blood to get into the patella tendon to help with the ligamentization process and just graft incorporation and graft healing and things of that nature. And maybe that's why we see a hamstring graft stretch out just a little. Like if you look at some studies, there is more laxity in a hamstring graft, and failure rates are higher in hamstring grafts. So yeah, I mean, I agree that I would recommend a bone patella tendon bone graft for most of my clients, unless they're older and a hamstring. Or they've already used a patella tendon graft. I'd probably recommend a quad tendon. But yeah, no, I agree. So the graft is stronger than your native ACL. The graft fixation is, I think, an important concept to remember, just because of how it's going to incorporate in the knee and how quickly it'll incorporate. And then I think it'll allow you to maybe go a little bit faster with your rehab, because we go the same speed with hamstring and patella tendon, but the hamstring graft doesn't incorporate for weeks, if not months after the patella tendon. I think it's even longer than we think. I think we're looking at a 2-year process of incorporation, not just like 6 weeks or 12 weeks. I think it takes longer than that. And that's what some of the research has shown. And we talk about this in our knee seminar courses. There are some slides that talk about that. It takes longer than 6 weeks or 12 weeks. This is a year or two process, at least.
Yeah. So all right. So let's get to Jeff's question and actually try to nail down the timing. So day one, right? The graft is stronger than your ACL, but the fixation's not.
Yeah, correct.
So I think it's a little misleading to say on day one it's strong, because I don't think the ligament plus the fixation together as a team is strong.
I think if you took the graft and you tried to break it,
right,
that's what I'm talking about is strong. But yes, you're only limited by the whole section of the graft, which is the bone and everything else. Yeah. So
clinically, that's why we're cautious at the beginning, is because the fixation strength isn't there. And that is perhaps why, a lack of a bony interface, like with the patellar tendon, even a quad tendon on one side, maybe that's why those don't do as well, is because they have such a long period of time where that fixation's not there. You have to be careful with that. So that's day one, right? The graft itself gets weaker, but then the fixation gets stronger over that first kind of initial period, right? So correct. When do you think, so bony tunnels, when do you think they heal up, Len? 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
I would say 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the health of the person, right? If they have, comorbidities, diabetes, something like that, then it might be limited. But I think in general, bone heals in 6 to 8 weeks. I think that's what we kind of go with is that time frame. And that's where I tend to do a little bit more faster, relatively, maybe with a patella tendon graft than hamstring graft. I think maybe that thinking is from the fixation. I think Kevin talks about that a lot too. It's always been in my head, and it's always something I see in the research. It's just the fixation strength. That's what you're limited by, not necessarily the pull. The hamstring tendon is stronger. It's like 4,000 newtons compared to a native ACL, which is 2,200, whatever it is, 2,500 newtons. A hamstring is much stronger than a patella tendon, or maybe even a quad tendon. Although quad tendon is much more robust, but it's just the fixation.
So why do they get loose and why do they fail more? It's because of the fixation. Right. So as a whole, that's why we have to, again, be careful when we say, well, the hamstring's stronger. The graft is, but the fixation isn't. Right. And you kind of put that together. Right. That's
never mind, you're taking a hamstring from somebody, that's their dynamic stability, which is helping to maintain posterior translation, prevent anterior translation. And you're taking dynamic stability from an organism, a human, that's trying to get stronger. And now they are going to be weaker because you took one of their tendons out, which now the muscle has nothing to attach to the bone. Some would argue that the tendon does grow back, but it's not as supple as your native tendon that was just removed if you had a hamstring graft.
All right. So it's 6 to 8 weeks out. A bony fixation is healing, but the graft now is weaker, right? Than when we first put it in, because it's going through that ligamentization process, right? Where it's actually starting to change, right? So now the tissue's engulfed. Sometimes it's even swollen, right? Sometimes you have some healing response to it, right? So that's actually at a weaker point. That's why we kind of go a little weaker. But Lenny, are you saying that's still stronger than the native graft?
Newton wise, yes, from what I understand.
That's cool.
Yes.
I mean, that's good to know. Yes. That's good to know. But still, all right. So let's go to the soft tissue grafts with the hamstrings. Then when do you think that starts to incorporate within the tunnels with the fixation strength of the procedure?
Right. I don't know 100% sure. Like what we know is, I would say I roughly use 12 weeks. Tendon tends to heal the bone roughly in 3 months, roughly. Again, it depends on the person, but like with rotator cuff repair, tendon healing to bone, when we're trying to repair a cuff or a patella tendon or any other tendon in the body, it seems like it takes about 12 weeks to really feel comfortable to be more aggressive with the person. But again, I think some of the studies that are in our knee seminar course and that are out there from 2011, Clay's 2011, another study in 2013 is showing, all these animal studies and other studies show it takes a year or two for incorporation to be 100% complete. Like 2 years for these grafts to really begin to look normal.
And I think it shows that too with Tommy John's too, and like the elbows and stuff. So it's interesting. So so I don't know. So Jeff, I mean, keep that in mind when we kind of talk about the strength in here. It's not just the strength of the graft; it's the strength of the fixation. It evolves over time, but we have to talk about probably what's like clinically relevant, right? So the strength at 3 months versus 6 months may not be that much different, but maybe some of these concepts will help you with your early phase rehabilitation.
Which is a reason why, if you see a lot of our protocols, the first 6 weeks is a healing phase. 6 to 12 weeks is kind of bring them along slowly, stress the tissue. It's not till about 12 weeks that you start to see in our slap repairs, which don't do a lot anymore, but Tommy John's, ACLs, that you start to see that next level of strengthening and the next level of really applying stresses to the area. That is the reason why. It's because we think some of that tissue takes at least 12 weeks to heal. So it's not just like we're pulling stuff out of air, right? There's a method to the madness.
And the fixation starts to take.
Correct.
I think that's exactly the important part. Exactly. That.
Yeah.
So awesome. All right. So Jeff, I hope that helped. If you have a question like that, head to mikereinold.com, click on that podcast link, and you can ask away. Just fill out that form. Anything you guys want to talk about, we're here to answer your questions. Please head to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, rate, review, subscribe. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much.